Gal checking in. I wanted to get on here real quick. I did not do a live yesterday, but I did want to get on here real quick today because there was something that I was thinking about that I don't think I've gotten deep to just yet on this channel, but it follows right along with the things that we've been talking about on this channel. Forgive me, guys. I just finished eating and I'm ready to relax, but I'm not quite finished with work yet. So I'm gonna make a video in between here. So people are sometimes not prepared mentally to meet what you're dealing with in the text because it's such an unbelievable concept that a book could predict the future, that you're actually reading words that can predict the future, right? In our modern understanding of, time and space, we don't, fit in time for prophecies. A lot of us are in our day-to-day world living and just getting by and just, you know, coasting, right? Following what is being told, um, absorbing what's being shown, and then not really implementing any of this information into your daily life to understand why things are happening and where you fit in all of the wild and craziness, right? Because a lot of times we see things wild and crazy and it seems disjointed, right? It seems like it doesn't match, it doesn't fit because all these different things are going on and we don't have the background information to interpret it with. Um, a lot of these situations, in order to interpret them properly, you've got to have background information. You have to understand what went on first in order to. Shalom, shalom, Mishpika. I'm sorry, Mishpika. I'm sorry. Doing a couple different here. Sorry for my pronunciation here. I've got to be working too. But shalom, shalom. El, shalom, shalom. We got two people on now. But we definitely want to get into the topic here. So when we confront the world, we have to consider what the ancient times have shown to be true. Because in the book of Daniel, you have a for sure reference to prophecy, right? And in that understanding, you have to know that the prophecies in Daniel came true. That there are many, many prophecies in the book of Daniel that have already proven themselves to be true. And this is such a profound thing that there should be no such thing as atheism. The first time you see a prophecy come to pass, you should see yourself, okay, well, logically, that means that the world cannot be what I assume it to be if there is access to parts of the timeline that didn't happen yet. That means that the timeline exists already outside of yourself and can be accessed by an entity that's greater than you. Do you see what I'm saying? That automatically proves that atheism is a lie if you have any true prophecy, right? And in Daniel, you have an entire book of, right? So you can see that the world perspective, the scientific perspective, is flawed. And so let's talk about at least just one of these prophecies that has come true. But before we do that, can we believe the book of Daniel? How do we know the book of Daniel is actually from Daniel, right? So there's a couple things in the book that just, outside of what the book says, that lets us know that the book is what it claims to be. Shalom, we have a third person on. Shalom, shalom. And so in Daniel, the book starts, of course, with Daniel going in captivity with the rest of his brethren. and him being chosen as one of the higher stock of Judah, and going into captivity in the palace, which is a high end captivity, but captivity. Do you see what I'm saying? And so, an interesting thing happened in the text, because we're not even talking about what the text says. We're really talking about the language of the text. Do you understand? The language, the language of the text changes in the second chapter. And so you have the whole first chapter where he just narrowly survives death by interpreting a dream. But in the second chapter, it starts with the second chapter. It starts with okay. So the second chapter is where we get into dream, and it starts there in the very beginning of the chapter, where his Chaldeans can't interpret the dream, and they begin to say to him. I think it's in 2 in verse 8, and the where the Chaldeans say to him, King live forever. No man can interpret this dream. Only the gods in heaven can interpret this dream. And so something interesting happened right there. The language of the text changes from Hebrew to Aramaic, right? It's almost as if Daniel, when he's writing the text, he switches from did I say English? Hebrew, from Hebrew to Aramaic right there, as the Chaldeans begin to talk to the king as if they're really saying these words. Do you see what I'm saying? He starts to speak Aramaic because the Chaldeans speak Aramaic. This is the language that the Babylonians speak. They don't speak Hebrew. They don't speak quote unquote Babylonian. They speak Aramaic. And they don't speak any old kind of Aramaic. They don't speak first century Judea Aramaic. They speak imperial Aramaic. And that's important to recognize, because imperial Aramaic comes from a specific time era, comes from a specific point in time in the high age of Babylon, when the language was purer and taught in their universities, and analyzed, was just like in our modern academic places, our modern schools, where we analyze our own language. They did the same thing back in the day. So in the Egyptian palace where the lives, they're going to be speaking High Egyptian. Do you see what I'm saying? Because they're being taught Egyptian, and they're not learning it from their environment. They're literally taught it. And in Babylon, it's the same thing. And so they speak imperial Aramaic and not modern Aramaic. You could say modern Aramaic, but first century Aramaic, right? And so what we see is that old Aramaic there, starting in the second chapter, right? And it actually continues all the way up through chapter 8. So most of the prophetic concepts in the book of Daniel are all written in Aramaic. It's some strange thing where, even though chapter 2 through chapter 8 are all kind of disjointed, because you've got some chapters that go before others. You've got another captivity that would have spoken another language that's mixed in there, like of course, the Persians. So it's a weird thing as to why this Aramaic switches right here. But we know that the style of Aramaic that Daniel is using here is High Aramaic, because we can see it in the text. It's not the same Aramaic that you would find the New Testament written in the first century. It's Old Aramaic. It's Imperial Aramaic, the time of the Babylonians. And so that's important to recognize, because it dates the text. Because Imperial Aramaic ceased to be spoken after the fall of Babylon. It didn't need to be spoken anymore. There were no schools of Aramaic after Babylon fell. So you just had the lay Aramaic, the Aramaic of the people, right? Not the learned Aramaic, low Aramaic. So that lived on in Judah, right? In the southern kingdom. So that continued to live on, but just the low style. And that's why we see the different style of Aramaic in the first century. So what we look at in Daniel's time period is literally an era that spans Daniel's lifetime. And this is the only era that it can really be ascertained that this book could have been written exactly how the book is written, right? The book is written from the perspective of Daniel, who is a 6th century BC prophet who was taken from Judah in captivity and taken by Nebuchadnezzar and army into Babylon. And that happens in 586 B, exactly at the time that they would have been speaking High Aramaic. Does that make sense? That dates this particular text without even looking, without interpreting a single word, it dates the text. And it just so happens that the words in the text also say this from this time period. Do you see what I'm saying? So we can analyze the text and find out that be true. You see what I'm saying? Before we even know anything about what it says, we can analyze the style of language that is being used and know that it's from that time period. Knowing this, we add an element of accuracy to Daniel. And then we also date Daniel. So it's the things that Daniel talks about that happen after this date have to be certified prophecies, right? But with with modern interpretation, what tends to happen is people lose their understanding, right? And so they begin to look for ways. I'm sorry, I'm still doing the back and forth here. I'm also still working here. So people be ability to discern between real information and false information, right? So the adversary has an opportunity to throw some monkey wrenches at you. And one that they like to say is that the entire Bible was rewritten, right? And around the time of Ezra, and then compiled from different scripts and put together and then put back out as a book, right? And I'll tell you guys, true, that did happen, but these ancient texts actually come from the places where they claim to come from. They are just compiled, right? That's the job of a scribe, is to compile text, not write the text themselves, but compile it from what other people are saying. You guys understand that's a scribe's job. A scribe would literally follow a person around and just write what he's. Not only that, they would rewrite the histories that they have, and it would be their job to do it word for word, right? It would be their job to do it word for word. And so that's why we have commentary in the text. People will say, okay, well, Deuteronomy couldn't have been written by Moses. Moses dies in it, right? Because Moses dies in the end of Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 34, 33, he dies. And, okay, well, he couldn't have written, no. Scribal tradition says, take all of the documents that this person wrote and then compile them together into a single form and then write his death at the end. Does that make sense? This is not a modern novella, right? Where people are trying to tell a story and persuade people into doing one thing or the other. It's an actual historical retelling of the spiritual and supernatural event that happened to a particular family of people. That's what the Bible is. It's prescribed because it's the Elohim of heaven. But literally, it's a recount of supernaturalism with the people of Israel. That's what it is. So when you understand, you look at it as if, okay, the scribal tradition is not rewriting the text, because then you lose the trueness of it. The scribal tradition is to date the text and to rewrite it in form and not in some sort of poetic uniqueness that puts your name on it. No, it's for historical purposes only, right? And so we see this in Daniel as well. But again, people want to throw a monkey wrench to your understanding to say, okay, well, if it was rewritten then, it could have been this, it could have been that. No, that's not even how the tradition works. The tradition works by maintaining the authenticity of the ancient text. Do you understand what I'm saying? Not only that, you wouldn't have been able to get away with manipulating the text because people had the text memorized. In ancient times, people's memories were strong enough to remember a whole swath, whole big chunks of book. So if you're going to rewrite, if you're going to change things, it'd be very difficult to do in front of a nation. Now, there were times when we lost books. There were times when we didn't recognize what was going on. But in the times that we did, it would be very hard to rewrite and recognize and change history in the way that people are saying that they did. So with this in mind, we want to make sure that we understand that Daniel can be trusted. The rest of the Bible can too, and for a lot of the same reasons. But specifically, we want to talk about Daniel, and Daniel can be trusted to be from where Daniel says it's from, right? From this era, from this time frame, and from these people. Has to be, because it's involving these two elements that only exist together in this short time, both Aramaic and Hebrew. And then this is not even any old type of Aramaic, it's High Aramaic. So before we even get to the text, we understand that Daniel's coming from where he's coming from. Now let's get to the text. The text says in chapter 2, when they're breaking down the dream, that there are going to be these kingdoms that go on the earth, right? Is it 5? The kingdom of gold, the kingdom of silver, the kingdom of bronze, the kingdom of brass. Is that what's next? And then iron and mirror clay. What is it? Gold, silver, bronze, brass, iron and mirror clay. Maybe I'm messing that up because you've got Babylon, you've got Persia, you've got Greece, you've got Rome, and then you've got the mystery kingdom at the end, which is a broken kingdom and a united kingdom. It's made out of iron, it's made out of clay. It's weird. It's unlike any of the other ones that have come before it. You guys starting to see where I'm going with this? So we prove that Daniel came from the actual golden kingdom that he's discussing in the dream, or that Nebuchadnezzar is seeing in the dream. We can tell 100% certainty that that's where Daniel comes from, just by the text, just by the style of Aramaic that's being used. And so if you go from there, and then you go to break down the kingdoms that come after Daniel, or come after Babylon, then you can see that, okay, well, he is predicting that these particular kingdoms are going to come to pass and do have this element of truth to them that is recognized by the declining in the quality of metal. You see gold or precious stone. So gold is the most precious stone. Then you have silver, which is the second most, and then brass, and then bronze and iron, and then clay, right? So we can see a deterioration of the strength of the kingdom. And we see after Nebuchadnezzar, there is a deterioration of the strength of the kingdom. And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. But we don't want to focus on that because this is still in the generation of Daniel. Let's just give the, let's just, yeah, I guess we can give it to the adversary to say, okay, Daniel could have written about the secondary kingdom while he was in the secondary kingdom of Persia, right? And he could have kind of played these events from a Persian perspective, seeing himself in Babylon. Do you see what I'm saying? Because Daniel actually survives the entire Babylonian captivity and makes it up to the Persian captivity, where at this time he's actually a ruler in Babylon. And then he goes on to become a ruler in Persia too. So he has touched both kingdoms, right? In this, 5-story statue of a dream that Nebuchadnezzar has about the end of the world. or all the kingdoms of the world, and then the end of the world. So we can kind of, yeah, we can give it to the adversary to say, okay, well, he's touched Persian Empire, so he can write about the Persian Empire and be accurate. We'll give him that. What about the next kingdom, the kingdom of Greece, which is different still? Okay, well, maybe he could see Greece on the horizon. What about the next kingdom after that, the kingdom of iron, right? Okay, well, we'll go even further with what will give the adversary to say, okay, this, you know, we'll take this, right? And we'll continue forward to see if your interpretation is true, right? So let's just give it to the adversary who says there were rewriters of the text in the first century that would have understood this to be the case, right? And wrote it in the first century that now that Rome is in power, writing in the concept of Rome. Okay, let's give that to them. All right, let's just say that this is possible. It's really not, but let's just say it is. What about that last kingdom? What about the kingdom of iron mixed with mirror clay? Now, there's no way that a group of people would be able to predict this because the Roman Empire lasts for another, after the first century, another 100 years, right? The Roman Empire lasts for another 400 years. The fall of the Roman Empire doesn't happen until around 5 AD. So that last feet and toes kingdom is well out of the reach of Daniel. Do you see what I'm saying? If you're going to prove prophetic event happening, choose the last one that is so far out of Daniel's wheelhouse that he wouldn't be able to understand anything that he had. And in fact, in future chapters, he didn't understand what he was looking at. But what he was looking at in that end time kingdom was the kingdom of Gog and Magog, y'all. And I hate to be like a broken record or, you know, a trick pony here, but the concept of Gog and Magog is the overarching theme of the world that we have today. And guess what? It exists as a shadow of the Roman Empire. Is that correct? Does it not exist with Catholicism having 1 billion people in it as a religion, right? And then its, you know, twin sister, Protestantism, having another billion. And these are both children of Rome, right? One full-on Roman Empire style Christianity. The second, its baby sister that just doesn't want to look to Rome as its answer. Is, you know, the the black sheep of the family, right? That wants to go its own direction, but it's still a sheep. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have right there a division of power, but a connection, just even in the Christian understanding, right? You're looking at something that is divided and together, because what Christian says Catholics are evil, or what Catholic says Christians are evil? None, neither. Do you see what I'm saying? So they're connected, but they're separate, right? And then, not only that, you have these people that are claiming to be Romans, but are not actually Romans. Remember, we know that the Goths took over in like 550 AD, or when Rome fell. The Lombards were the Gothic tribe that came in and reestablished Rome, reestablished Italy, and then went on to come the Italians, right? Not the Romans, the Italians. The Romans mixed in with this Gothic group, but a lot of them were slaughtered. Do you see what I'm saying? Enough as to wipe out the real lineage of Rome. The Romans today are not Romans. And this is why you see iron and mirror clay. It has the strength of the iron, but is discombobulated. Do you see what I'm saying? It appears to be the iron, but it's broke all of these different factions. Is that not what we're seeing? Even coming from the European continent, where you have all of these different groups of Magogite clans, each which is taking portions of the world. Like you had the rulers of Belgium, which came down into Africa, chopping limbs off, King Leopold and that lineage coming and conquering Africa, right? Setting up kingdoms in Africa. You have the French setting up kingdoms in Africa and in the United States. Before, of course, during the time of the expansion in the United States, you've got these mega tribes coming from England and setting up places all over from Europe and setting up places all over the world as a single, united but separate Magogite rule over the world. Does that make sense? That Daniel's prophecy could, knock the drink over. That, yeah, we can give the adversary, okay, Daniel, you're in the Babylonian time, so you can say it's the head of gold. Okay, Daniel, you're in the Persian time, so you can say it's the shoulders of silver. Okay, you're very close to the Greek times. You may have, heard of some of these, Greek scholars of the day that are beginning to come on the scene, right? So you can kind of predict Greece coming next. You're a little far-fetched with Rome, because Rome was really a nothing nation at this time. But you all the way out of the way to say Gog and Magog, way in the future, that's going to be this disjointed kingdom. And this disjointed kingdom is going to be ruined by a rock that comes from the sky that's cut with no hands. That strikes the statue on the feet and creates an entire world of the rock, right? Do you see what I mean? You're way, way, way far off of that interpretation, be able to have access to it as far as society, to have some sort of inference that this is what's going to happen in the future. It's a for sure prophecy. Right there. If you understand Gog and Magog, who Gog and Magog are, it's a for sure prophecy. You cannot deny that. Do you see what I'm saying? You've proven what era Daniel comes from, and then you've proven that he's correctly prophesied the state of the world right now. Do you see what I'm saying? The state of the world right now. I'm still checking in on these. And shalom, shalom, everybody that's here. Oh, greetings, my brother. How are you doing? I'm glad to see you around. We still here talking about Daniel. So you guys will have to understand that the people that are discounting the text or saying that there's any sort of flaw in the reasoning in the text or in the dating of the text are just misinformed or deceiving you, because the text is so verifiably prophetic that, that they use it, that they know these prophecies too. You guys have to understand, it was our people that first started to battle against Daniel. It was the ancient Judites, which, in the time of the Messiah, when people were were flocking to the Messiah in droves, the leadership at that time, our ancestors, fought against it. They even put a curse on anybody. And so you can look this up in the history. This is us. This is not Ashkenazi Jews. It's not, any Yemeni Jews. It's not the Edomites or any of these other groups that people want to blame for the state that we're in now. This is, right, our people that put a curse on our believing brothers that says that any fingers that flip through the pages of Daniel to try to calculate the time of the Messiah made their fingers melt from their bones. This is the curse that our misguided ancient fathers put on their brothers that were believing in Messiah. This is the reason why we're in the state we're in now. Do you see what I'm saying? And I guess this kind of goes off the topic of Daniel, but this is how important Daniel is. They saw in a century how important Daniel was, because they recognized that from Daniel chapter 9, people were figuring out and coming to the conclusion that, Daniel's talking about this generation that we're in right now for the Messiah returning. And guess what? That guy who we just killed must have been him, because it couldn't be any other time. Daniel says in Daniel chapter 9 that it's what, 49 weeks until, was it 49 or 69? I can't remember right now, but the prophecy there. And if you calculate it down from the time that the city is rebuilt, and this is talking about, they say the wall of the city, but the city itself, this is talking about the time of Ezra. From that time is I think it's 49 weeks or 70 weeks or somewhere around there. It's been a while since I've done that Daniel research, but when I did it, I found it to be accurate. So it comes right up to the time of the first century, and people were recognizing it. And the enemy of Messiah was recognizing it. So much so that we have today in the records of the times of the first and second century, when Messiah was having the most prominence in the Hebraic community, that the leaders of the Hebrews at that time literally made a curse pronouncement on people that were looking at Daniel in order to find the time of the Messiah. It was such a popular thing to do that the leaders of the time had to stop people from doing it. Do you see what I'm saying? This is the type of backlash you get from the truth, even from your own. Even in ancient times, in the times that are predicted in the moment. You're literally looking at the predictions coming through, but you're so enamored with what you already have that you can't change enough to see what time it is. Do you see what I'm saying? And this is the reason why we went into captivity, because we couldn't see our own salvation, right? The veil was still over our eyes. We're talking about that in 2 Corinthians today, actually, that, the leaders of Judah had this veil over their face, right? The veil that's from Moses, when Moses when Moses was coming off of the mountain, and he has the shine of Elohim still on him, so much so that the elders couldn't look directly at Moses because of the glory. So Moses had to cover his face with the veil so that he could even be in their presence, right? And so Paul says that the readers of the Old Testament still had that veil over their face, because they're looking at the Old Testament as the goal, right? Looking at the law as the goal, right? When the goal is to be in the kingdom. Do you see what I'm saying? The goal is to be the servant of Messiah, to recognize Messiah when he comes, so that you can be a part of his kingdom. This is why he says that veil is done away with in Messiah, because you can look at Messiah right in the face and recognize him, and his glory will be absorbed on you, and you will shine back, and you'll be glory to glory. Does that make sense? He's not saying you get rid of the Old Testament. He's saying that when you recognize the purpose of the Old Testament, you'll then see the outcome, the goal, to be in the kingdom with Messiah. And here's Messiah right in front of you. You see what I mean? This is the importance of Daniel, because Daniel recognizes the situation. It's so poignant. And here's another really wild thing. Was Paul black? Yes, Paul was black. Paul was a Jew that was raised in Tarsus, but he was also the son of a Pharisee, who was also the son of a Pharisee. So he was involved in the highest level of education that a Hebrew could have. And we know that all the Hebrews were black. We know that Acts chapter 13 starts with who is Simon called Niger. And then there are many, many other instances. Of course, in Acts chapter 21, when Paul is looking for an Egyptian, aren't you that Egyptian that took with you 4,000 men who are murderers into the wilderness? And he says, no, I'm a Jew from no mean city, Tarsus, a city of Cilicia. So he's mistaken for an Egyptian right there by a Roman who would have known what Egyptians look like. Do you see what I'm saying? How can a Jew and an Egyptian be mistaken one for another if they didn't look exactly alike? And you can take a look at Egyptians looked like in the first century from the paintings on the wall and from the descriptions of the Romans. Tacitus is one that says the Egyptians and Ethiopians and the Jews must all come from the same place because they all look just alike, right? And so Ethiopia means land of the blacks. And so that means that if Egyptians look like Ethiopians and Ethiopians look like Jews, and these are all ancient contexts, then they all three must be black. So we know that Paul is black, right? For that Roman centurion in Acts chapter 21 to mistake Paul for an Egyptian means he must have looked black skinned because the Egyptians categorized as black skinned people by the Romans in the first century. Tacitus is a century Roman historian, and he talks about all of these things. Talks about the complexion of the Jews and the Ethiopians, and they look like they were the same, that they were the same people. So we know for a fact that Paul was black. See what I mean? You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. So we understand that in the first century, I was talking about Josephus. I think I was meaning to get to Josephus, but I hadn't got there just yet. So about Daniel, in the first century, Daniel was being looked very, very, very closely because all of these prophecies were coming true, right? People are starting to see, like, we can see today that, wait a second, these nations coming one after another are continuing to come true, right? We know that for the video that Alexander was shown these prophecies about himself and he to fulfill those prophecies. That didn't stop with Alexander. That continued to go further into the time of the first century and beyond, century BC to first century AD, right? And so a late Jewish historian, which a lot of people, throw shade at because of his history. This is Josephus, a late historian of the Jewish Empire after the fall, starts to write about these things too, and starts to write about Daniel. And something very interesting about Josephus is it appears that he converts in the middle of his historical studies. It appears that he converts to Nazarimism. You guys may not know this, but Josephus is probably the second most important historical document of all time, right? Of course, we know what the first one is. The first one is the Bible, and I would include with the Bible most of the pseudepigraphal books, like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Judith, some of the other Daniel-esque books. I would include in Esdras and third Esdras and fourth Esdras, or I guess second Esdras or third and fourth Esdras would be, because there's six Esdras, right? So all of that whole series, I would include them. I would include some parts of Jasher. I would include some parts of Jubilees, just not all, because there's some things going on with Jasher and Jubilees. But this is the corpus of the text, right? And Josephus would have been familiar with all of the text. He was from a scribal family, or he was from a priest family. He was a Levite. And it appears that he converted in the middle of his historical studies. And people hate Josephus because he was literally treasonous traitor against Judah. But he has the second most profound historical document, ever written, because it outlines the entire history of the Bible in an independent source, right, from a first century perspective. It goes all the way from Adam to Tiberius. Do you see what I'm saying? It goes from Enoch to the Ephesians, right? It goes all the way through the entire biblical story. Josephus doesn't miss a beat, right? And so he writes two books, right? And the first of his books is called Wars of the Jews. And he admits in Wars of the Jews that he made some errors, right? And so he goes and redoes his Wars of the Jews, except he starts from way, way earlier. Of course, he's going over all the wars that Jews have participated in because he's now a subject of the Roman throne, right? He's a Roman historian now because Judah has already fallen. Jerusalem has been destroyed. They've taken on Josephus as a real scribe. And a part of his, royal responsibility was to kind of give the rundown on who the Jews were. And he actually was really up for the challenge, according to himself, because people were disparaging the war, saying that the Romans just, ran over the Jews and, they posed no significant threat. And Rome just wiped them out like they did all of these other no-name nations. And Josephus comes and says, it's not how it happened. Let me show you what happened. And so he writes Wars of the Jews, right? Let me show you who this group of people is, why we are famous, why you should pay close attention, and then also let me describe what else that our people have done. Do you see what I mean? And so he writes this book, and he himself admits he made some mistakes, right? So that he wanted to do a second version to revise. Once he puts the second version out, that he's putting it out to revise all the errors in the first book, right? And so he does. There's some figures that he recalculates and puts out. And if you analyze both books, they're found to be more accurate in the second book. One thing that he does, though, in the second book that he doesn't do in the first is follow the Pharisaic interpretation of Daniel 9. You see what I'm saying? He changes it. He changes it to fit the more accurate messianic version. And the only people that do this are people that believe in Messiah, because it was taught the opposite way. It was taught incorrectly so that people wouldn't be flipping their fingers through Daniel to try to find the date of the Messiah. Joseph preaches it in the messianic style the second time. I'm coming, Sheik. I'm almost finished. All right, I'm coming. All right, I'm coming. So yeah, so it is very interesting that Josephus changes his interpretation of Daniel, which means he's a messianic believer, but couldn't publicly say he was because he was in Rome and the believers were getting their heads chopped off. The believers were getting fed to lions. The believers were being crucified. They were being burned at the stake by Caesar. Nero used to light believers up. Nazarene, they call them Christian, but these are Nazarene Hebrew people. He used to tie Nazarene to poles and light them on fire to light his dinner parties for his guests. This is how evil man that Nero was. And so Josephus hid his messianism in the text. Do you see what I'm saying? This is how important the book of Daniel is. Yeah, I'm telling you, when you read, when you look at, the people are like we are in every generation. They have to discover these things to be true themselves. Do you see what I'm saying? In every generation, there's an adversary. And the adversary is pushing you this way and that way to the philosophies of the time and in the direction away from what the text says. But in even the ancient times, 2,000 years ago, people were kind of just saying, duh, like waking up. And you can see it happening in their own writings. That's the the just wonderful thing about it, is that you can just sense the change in people by the text. You can sense, you can understand the accuracy of the text by the emotions the writer is going through. If he's going through the same thing that you're going through 2,000 years ago, and he comes to this conclusion, and you come to the same conclusion, I mean, it's a witness from it's a 2,000-year-old identical witness. He said 2 or 3 witnesses, right? You've got you in this generation, and you got Josephus 2,000 years ago. You see what I'm saying? It's a very, very, very significant clue that we have in reality for the accuracy of Daniel. And what Daniel says is, and this is the wildest part, what Daniel says is we're living in the feet in the toes kingdom right now, and this is the last one. Daniel says this is the last one. That's what Daniel's saying. This is the kingdom where Messiah returns. No, now matter how long this kingdom lasts, we know that Rome has been not a kingdom since 1500 years. So the kingdom has been an extended kingdom, sure, but it's just now developing into that kingdom. We're just now seeing the heads of the dragons with the crowns on the, what is it, the 10 crowns and the 10 horns. We're just now seeing all of this come in fruition right in front of us. We're seeing what Daniel was prophesying about, these toes, they will mingle themselves with the seed of men. We're seeing that now in these, generations, and we can only just now come to this understanding that they could only have dreamt about back in the day. We now have access to their information and ours, right? It's just, are we going to be led away with the philosophy of the current times, or are we going to rely on the text? Are we going to rely on the Father to lead us and to show us this minutia that means so much, right? Okay, you guys, my wife has been calling, so let me go ahead and end there. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time. I'm gonna go ahead and end it on that note. I appreciate you guys for swinging through. It's definitely always, an encouraging thing to see that people, can glean some information off of these, I guess you could call them just conversations that we're having. I want them to be more conversation than lecture or teaching or anything that really just, that's why I don't have the scripture right in front of me. That's why I don't have any of the citations right in front of me. I want it to be more conversational style where you guys, oh, thank you, brother, for tuning in for sure. But I want it to be more conversational style so that, it can be informal. I don't want it to be like a formal sit down, let's study the text, or a formal, this is a history lesson. I want to be able to have, kind of a lighthearted conversation that we can get into the text, get into some of these historical ideas, and then flesh them out and talk about them, and kind of make the connections on our own. And of course, we're led by the Spirit, and we are educated in the text, so we can speak freely on it. So if it's in our heart, it's in our heart, and we'll come to the correct conclusions, Father willing. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off on this one. Shalom, shalom, everybody. It says, I appreciate how you connect the history and the text. Hallelujah. That's what we're here to do. The scripture says that that faith is evidence of things unseen, the substance of things hoped for. So I always like to look at it in that light, that it's not about, this, fuzzy belief feeling that you have inside where I just believe this to be true. I believe it to be reliant upon evidence and substance, right? If you have evidence in the text or in reality around you for things unseen, that's not nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? That's literal evidence. And you should be able to point a finger at what that evidence is. And we can with confidence because it's there, right? If we couldn't, it'd be a different story. It'd be, deception, but we can confidently say this is what we stand on because the evidence exists. These evidences in Daniel exist, and no way to kind of maneuver around that Daniel is a real and true to life prophetic book. There's no way to maneuver around that. People have been realizing this for 2,000 years, right? So we appreciate the text. We appreciate Elohim for showing us these clues in the text that help us to validate, the text in our own hearts, because we do have to do that in this modern era, since we've been steered so far philosophically left that, we hardly trust any text anymore. But this one, we can for sure, lay our hope and our foundation on because of the substance and the evidence found therein that validates our faith, right? It validates the things that we cannot see. So, absolutely. He said 100%. Hallelujah. It says, thank you for this teaching. I'm looking at prophecy and identity so much differently because of your teaching and you man's. Hallelujah. It's not coming from me. It's definitely coming from the Father above. The text is the text. It's been around way longer than me. So definitely appreciate you guys for saying this. But all of this information is really just public knowledge, and it's just waiting for, the conversation, the right conversation to put it all together. And, when we're all together doing the same thing with the same goal in mind, we can all look at each other's work and look at each other's, and these styles of conversation and come to the correct conclusion, especially if we do, with the spirit and with the mature and scripturally based attitude, with all of the right information. Elohim has made it very, very easy for us in this era. It hasn't been forever, but us in this era, we're just in a blessed generation where we have access to this information and we're able to, accurately interpret it so that it can be the most useful to us in our own lives, and also that we can teach the right thing so that people will understand. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I really appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Um, yeah, a blessing and favor on you all. Shalom, shalom.